So our next presentation is on resiliency and stormwater enhancement in the public realm. We're going to have Christopher Roog from West Palm Beach Community Redevelopment Agency give this next presentation. And Chris, I will turn this over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you, everyone. Can you all hear me? Good sound check.
Yes, we
Wonderful.
can. Yes.
Excellent. Okay, so my name is Christopher Roog. I am the economic development, or I'm sorry, I was the economic development director for the city of West Palm Beach, and now I'm the executive director of the city of West Palm Beach, handling a lot of redevelopment activities, one of which is Currie Park, that just recently got a substantial grant from the state of Florida's CDBG Rebuild Florida grant program, and it was awarded earlier this year. So I'll be talking a little bit about that. But if we can go to the next slide. I'll do a quick overview of the city. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the east coast of Florida, but I'll just give you some details of sort of a picture of West Palm Beach. I go over a brief history of the park that recently got this grant, and then talk about the project, what we intend to do with it for the long term, how we intend to fund it. And even though the project is still unfolding, there are some takeaways that I think will be beneficial to the group. And then at the end of it, I am happy to answer any questions. But this map that you're seeing now, this kind of gives you a good idea that West Palm Beach is one of those great American cities where, we have a dense urban core on our east side, which is, and the star represents where Currie Park is. Where it says West Palm Beach is essentially our central business district, that's downtown. But that big blue block over there, that is Grassy Waters Preserve. And that is essentially not only sort of the northeastern part of the Everglades that has been preserved, but it's also the city's water source. And that's about half of the landmass of the city. Very, very important part. And it's vehemently protected by the residents of the city of West Palm Beach because of not only its natural importance to the ecosystem, but also because it supplies the water to the residents and of not only West Palm Beach, but also the town of Palm Beach, which is our neighbors to the east on the barrier island. Next slide. So West Palm Beach is pretty big place, 57 square miles. As I mentioned, we have the best of both worlds with an urban and natural setting. Our population is rapidly increasing, which is good for us from an economic standpoint, but it is going to continue to put pressures on sort of all of our resources. We are a majority minority city. And we're a young one and continue to get younger as we attract, companies that are hiring a younger workforce. Being the county seat, we are sort of that hub of activity, and we're very fortunate that we have 2 train stations, an airport that's within a bike ride of our downtown, 2 community redevelopment agency areas, one for our downtown, one in the north end. The north end one is the one that's actually spearheading the project at Currie Park. We've got about 8 miles of waterfront that run the length of our downtown. We really have tried to connect that for our residents in sort of this linear park for everybody. A really important thing to note is that we do have a strong mayor form of government, which I think has gone a long way to revitalizing the city of West Palm Beach. I'm from here, a local, been here my whole life. And if any of you know West Palm Beach's history, it's not a great one. It had a point where essentially downtown you would not go into late at night, and it's come back in just a great way. And historically, again, we are fortunate to have that $3 billion in new development that occurs that's in the pipeline, and we've had that now for probably the last 5 years. It's been sustained at that $3 billion with not only projects getting completed, but new ones continuing to be filed with the city. So very fortunate for us from an overall perspective. Next slide. So getting into the park of where this project is being located, it is on the intercoastal. The largest park that is closest to ocean access. And it's historically it was a seaport for seaplanes, which was kind of a neat history. And there'll probably be some play on that as we get into the design aspects of it. If you live close to the water, it is very, very affluent, but you don't have to go very far, maybe just a couple of blocks, and it becomes a low-income community. So this park will serve quite a bit of residents of all walks of life, including income. Fortunately, there is no drawbridge to Ocean Inlet, so that also makes it very, very attractive from a marine standpoint. And I'll talk about it a little bit more, but we're actually contemplating a marine usage for this park. And then because this park historically has been, as you see it now in this picture, with just large amounts of green space, very much a passive park, there has been a strong desire to see it improved and just more vibrant and activated in order to provide amenities that the community really demands. But very large park at 7 acres, so it is an ambitious project. Next slide. So we've initially broken the park into 2 phases. Luckily, first phase has been complete. And that's where we did quite a bit of basically information gathering, studies, understanding what we want to do, and then developing a plan around it. Very high level concept that was recently approved in July. And I'm sorry, the end of June. And it was I would say bona fide community driven. Lots of meetings, many of which I attended, where folks really got into the finer details of what they would like to see in the park, but then also thinking about how we can make it sustainable through different governance strategies, revenue strategies, to understand how this park can survive on its own. Many of you being in city and county governments know the cost of running parks. They're very, very high. And we don't want to see a big dollop of improvement go into this park, only to see it then become sort of a burden for the city to maintain a high level and high quality amenity. We really wanted to have some type of strategic funding plan to keep it cherry for the coming for the long term of the life of the park. So we're currently, so the city commission, the mayor and city commission approved the project, as I said earlier this summer. And now we are in that phase 2 design and permitting aspect of it. And we still continue to chase grants, but we expect to have that 50% here done shortly. And I'll talk about the reasons why when we get into the funding, but we did have some bond dollars approved to it. So that kind of puts us on the clock to get this project done. And then ultimately it'll go out to bid, and then we'll start using some of those funding dollars to actually build it. Next slide. But overall, the project has 6 main goals that really are broad. But when we think about one of the big reasons why we were able to get a large grant from DEO for the resiliency and sustainability for this project, it was because we made creating resiliency and celebrating the ecology of this area hallmarks and cores of the overall project. The city, being that 8 miles of waterfront, we have a tremendous obligation to maintain that seawall, and it is no cheap feat. And the seawall that's currently at Currie Park is in very much severe disrepair that needs to be addressed, and we're trying to do it through this living shoreline that allows more of a way for storms to kind of actually come into the park and go out of the park in an easier fashion, in order to make it more resilient and sustainable as as storms become more frequent here in South Florida. But along that lines, also just really celebrating a lot of that ecology that currently exists. I mean, you can go out there now, and on a good high tide, when the water comes in, being so close to the inlet, you can experience all kinds of things, from manatees to sea turtles and a variety of other things. So we really want to enhance that to make it even more so. And that just is in line with a larger strategy with Palm Beach County overall to revive that Lake Worth Lagoon into a way that's very vibrant and just sort of attracts more wildlife and continues to make the water more attractive for recreational uses. But overall, again, it is to make this project just very attractive for residents overall to use it on a regular basis. Next slide. So this is what the park, this is a rendering of the concept plan that was approved by the city commission earlier this year. And as you can see, it really does invite quite a bit of activity. We aren't anticipating any kind of swimming per se, because the current is pretty strong around this area, but there's no reason why you couldn't have other activities that include boating, kayaking, things like that. And really, as you can see, the living shoreline aspects of it, really making that a centerpiece for the overall park. And then even down where you have the steps where you could touch the water and things like that. That's where the resiliency and design comes in, where the water could easily sort of ebb and flow during tides, king tides, storms, so on and so forth. And really building on a lot of the native plants and things that you would find up and down the Lake Worth Lagoon now, high mangrove forests and things like that. Next slide. So the legacy of the project really is to sort of build back what once was. Although, I don't want to be overly ambitious and say that, it's going to go back to this 1800s feel of a freshwater lake. I think, that's not realistic, but, very much cleaning it up to a more viable way that it was back when in its earlier time, when you have a much cleaner and more attractive lagoon. That is really where we're trying to head with this overall project, and really taking cues from our past, so that this Lake Worth Lagoon and Currie Park is a critical part of the overall experience when our residents use it. Next slide. And again, that starts with really building in that ecological standpoint and having sort of this garden, if you will, in the middle of a really dense urban environment where it's almost like a retreat. And I think when you start building in those items, you can get away from a lot of the stressors that we've been experiencing through on the East Coast through the development that we know has had a negative impact on our intercoastal waterway and making it much more attractive. And again, this is in line with a lot of other areas up and down the East Coast of Florida that have taken on sort of the same initiatives. Next slide. So ultimately what you get is, strengthening that connection with our urban residents, and then also having that resiliency that's built so that, that overall experience just, is a great balance and creates that amenity for our residents in the foreseeable future. And as we start, there's a lot more that's going into the stormwater. We have a lot more bonds and things like that. So I don't have all the technicalities because it is still being in design phase. We're currently working on the 50% design of it, but this will give you a pretty good idea of how we are trying to manage all of those different stressors in order to create that experience for our residents. Next slide. So this park is going to be very, very expensive, eye-wateringly expensive. But as I've come to learn, this is just one of those things that comes with waterfront parks. When you look at the permitting and other aspects and just the making sure that we are going to do it right for the foreseeable future, there's just no other way around it. This project was originally kickstarted by the residents of the city of West Palm Beach. In 2020, they passed a parks bond of about $30 million. And it was very specific when we took that to the voters and said, we want to improve our parks throughout the city. And the lion's share of that 30 million was going to go to Currie Park. And we were very clear about that. We were going to use that $8 million and spend it by September 2023 in order to get this park improved. And that was a big reason why the voters approved it. when you put yourself on a clock like that and you build in that accountability and they know when they can expect projects to be completed, that resonated with our residents. So once that bond passed in March of 2020, the CRA, which is my agency, and we get our tax revenue from both the city and county millage rates, said, okay, in order to keep that $8 million in the project for actual construction, we will augment that money and cover those design and permitting costs. And we are well north of 2 million by now. The phase one was about 750,000, and phase two is about 3.2 million. So as you can see, we're already getting up there in the amount of money, and that's just in design and permitting. And while we were doing the phase one concept, and we knew that we had that plan in the works, we started to apply for the DEO Construction and Infrastructure Grant, and we were very fortunate in getting a very sizable amount from DEO for that 16.7 million. That is going to go into construction, mainly on the seawall, the living shorelines, and those resiliency aspects, and I'll talk about those in a moment. And that will bring the total up as of now to that 26.7 million. But much of that doesn't include everything that we want to do, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. We actually are chasing other grants in order to sort of fill that remaining gap. But I think at the end of the day, this park is looking at between a $30 and $35 million price tag. Next slide. So this just gives you a little bit more insight into those actual costs and what they were, some of the aspects of what went into them. Going to the CRA dollars, as I mentioned, from the county and city taxes, that phase one, that 750, was really on that concept design and that marina market study. So we looked at, okay, once we get the park complete, we would like to put in some aspects or some amenities that will make the park sustainable. And we have marinas up and down the east coast of Florida, but there's not enough, and there is a high demand for those. And when we did that marine market study, it came back very favorably that this could be a very critical strategy in order to make our park sustainable and be that funding source to keep it in a premium condition for the foreseeable future, in addition to identifying some grants and other opportunities in order to fill that gap. So where we're at now is in that phase two aspect of developing the technical documents and permitting that will take a little bit of time, but also getting into the nuts and bolts of exactly those revenue strategies and how we're going to govern the park. And that we're actually looking into including the surrounding property owners. And it may include some type of committee or board that could actually manage this park outside of the normal parks and recreation system as a potential option in order to make sure, again, that the park stays in very good condition for the foreseeable future. Next slide. So as we get into the DEO community development block grant that we were able to achieve, when we originally applied, we requested 20.9 million for this project. We did sort of really beef up the cost of what we thought the project was going to be. That's that $44.5 million. And we're clear on what exactly we wanted to fund with those monies. And again, all of the things that you see on the left side here with the items requested items to be funded were things that were built into the resiliency, and that was just outlined clearly in the grant opportunity, that they wanted to make sure that what we included in our application were those items that were going to make the park resilient for the foreseeable future. And then we also identified the other items that were going to be funded through the city's park or through the park bond and potential other grant sources. And you can see those are all essentially the above ground amenities that you would expect to see in any park. All of the fun items that usually get a lot of the discussion with the community members. Not too many people talk about the resiliency aspects and seawalls. So it's a clear line of what the DEO will fund with that 16.7 million that we were ultimately awarded. Next slide. So we're currently working through this grant process. It is tedious, but that's okay. And we expect to have some details and on exactly when those grant dollars will be delivered. We're going to use some interesting methods that fortunately DEO is acceptable with, things like construction manager at risk, not necessarily taking the lowest bid, because we do want to get the right team for this job. The city has seen a lot of projects that just because you don't have the right team in place, even though they may have been the cheapest bid, projects haven't really saved all that much money because of delays and perhaps just running into challenges that the team wasn't really prepared for from an experience standpoint. So we're really going to put our nose to the grindstone to make sure that we get the right team for this overall project. Other grant opportunities, we've identified 11 million in those opportunities. We don't need all of that. I think that if we can get to at least that $6 million in additional grant opportunities, one of which we have on October 6th, we'll be pursuing a cultural programming and arts grant with the state of Florida, that if we can, garner about 6 million in additional grant dollars for the overall project, we'll get the park that was promised and shown to the residents of West Palm Beach and to the region. And most of that will be for that above ground work. Next slide. So, and I know I'm running on time, short on time here. So lessons learned so far, it really did start with that local public leadership leading the bond initiative that really kickstarted the funding that gave everybody the green light to move forward and gave grant makers the confidence that this is a project that is going to be funded. I mentioned picking the right team because, again, we want to make sure that this project, because it has an aggressive timeline to meet those deadlines and manage all of these grant opportunities. Maintaining that community connection, we want to make sure that our residents continue to have buy-in. They have been a big part of moving this forward as well and gave confidence to our elected officials to move forward. And continuing to make resiliency and sustainability a priority. Everybody wants to see these items addressed, and then maintaining clear expectations so that the park is delivered in the time that we promised everyone. Next slide. So I want to leave you with this one because when we designed the park, I always thought for anybody out there that's sort of a Jimmy Buffett or Jack Johnson fan, the park is designed to really just have great experiences for our public realm, as well as meet a lot of those resiliency items. And I very much see, the opportunity where you could actually sit in a kayak and maybe enjoy a really fun concert in the coming years here in West Palm Beach, and hopefully you all will be able to join us. So thanks so much. Happy to take any questions.
Sounds great, Christopher. Thank you for the presentation and the nice visual at the end. We've got time for a couple of questions. I'd like to open the floor for anybody.
And if we could just go back to the site plan. Yeah, that last slide, that just gives you a good idea of the different aspects that are included in the overall park and what we intend to do.
Chair, if I might add a comment really quickly.
Please go ahead.
I just wanted everyone to understand the context of why you're seeing this presentation. Obviously, this is outside our service area, but there is a really unique opportunity right now with the Florida Department of Economic Opportunity to access these CDBG-MIT funds. And if you go to the CHNEP.org website, under our funding tab, there is a resiliency funding page that has a fact sheet about this funding opportunity. In 2022, they're going to be doing their cycle 3 application notice, looking for projects like this. And they have over $150 million to award to local municipalities who are engaging in projects like this. So we wanted to give you a prototype of how they are building a resiliency stormwater management enhancement project that qualified for, in this case, $17 million worth of funding, so that hopefully that would stimulate your ideas about how you could access potentially these resources to further resiliency and stormwater management in your own community. And we have been in contact with DEO, so we have some specifics. If you are interested in pursuing this, please let us know and we'd be happy to help.
Can I just ask a question?
Please go ahead.
We've got a wonderful project, the Bay Park up here in Sarasota. And I'm just wondering, are you aware, have they asked for grant money through this opportunity? This seems like an ideal situation for what they're doing there.
I personally I have not been contacted by anybody from Sarasota County to express an interest in that. We also write letters of support for grants. So
Okay.
often we are contacted by partners. If you wouldn't mind looking into that and knitting us together with the right staff. They just closed cycle 2 on September 17th, but this cycle 3 is going to be coming up here in the near future, this coming year. So we want to make sure that we're starting to line up projects to get in. That's the final cycle of funding. So this would be our last opportunity to get funding.
I will make sure we do that today. That looks like a great opportunity. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would say the more shovel ready your project is, the better off you're going to be.
Oh, it's shovel ready.
Excellent.
It's a great project. Very exceptional, and it's very in many ways similar to what you're doing here, but on the bayfront. So it might be an ideal project for this. Thank you.
Could I ask a question, please?
Please go ahead, Jack.
All right, this is Jack Bisson with Swiftmud. It's a wonderful looking project here, and very modern and everything. Would anything be put in there for sea level rise? I mean, I'm sure it's a little bit out. Do you like elevate the seawalls or anything? I was just sort of curious, because this is a modern kind of deal, and hopefully people will follow suit on some parks and everything along our waterways and stuff.
Yes, in fact, many of the aspects along, and I think that some of them are identified here. I think I see 13, and then, anyways, yes, but including things that sort of build up the not only the sea level and the living shoreline aspects of it, but as you get into the park, actually sort of creating these hills or sort of larger dune aspects. They're not really dunes because they're not going to be made up of sand, but things that, allow sort of the water to come in and not necessarily get over those dunes, but allows it to sort of ebb and flow in the event of a storm. So many of those details do need to continue to be ironed out. That's where we're at now, is understanding the exact design and engineering technicalities behind all of those. But that was part of the overall application that we promised to DEO.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Roog, for joining us, giving this presentation. Greatly appreciate it, and best of luck with this park. It looks like a fantastic place. And I'd like to just thank Jennifer for putting together a great series of presentations. I'd like to thank all the presenters. It was great to see kind of the beginning conceptual thoughts associated with new standards that are coming in place, looking at how future rainfall will affect stormwater, and then looking at this specific project and get funding opportunity. It was great to see all pieces of that related to the theme that you chose for stormwater.
Yeah, and I'd also, if the committee will have me, like I said, because we don't have a lot of, I think, those finer details that many of you would love to see, those will be forthcoming. And whether it's when we get those construction documents completed and we know those technicalities, or even if it's in, the coming years, we do anticipate this project to be completed by 2023, which is very, very aggressive. I think, the committee would probably find it very informative to actually understand some of the finer details and what the end product was actually like to be. So something that's kind of an open invitation back to this group. I'm always happy to come back and relay additional details as the project moves forward. So, but thank you all very much for having me. I appreciated the opportunity.
Thank you for that. I'm sure a lot of the committee will be interested in those additional details.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.